Hey, welcome. I am going to do a live stream for Going Deeper. It's my intention, and it's been my intention recently to do one of these at least every week. I planned to do this earlier in the week, but there's an expression that man plans and God laughs. So we've had some more interesting events happening. And I've started to ask myself, what is it that I'm meant to experience, that I'm meant to shift through everything that's happening in my life and in the world around me? And that is one of the underlying themes of what I want to present today. So this is going to be probably a little longer than usual. Feel free to hop on and off if you need to, because I want to bring out, I'm writing notes like throughout the day. I'm having like downloads and like things that I feel I must present. So as events continue, I personally, going deeper as I always want to do, I personally am getting more information and more insight. And sometimes, and this is a principle of reality, that when you get a new piece of information or a new insight, sometimes it's the one that's going to make a new picture form. It's going to click. And as soon as something clicks, when you have a significant new piece of the puzzle, things often reorganize, almost to the point where they flip. So first of all, we are in the messianic redemption. There's no question about it. Also, tonight, Friday night, tomorrow, Shabbat, Saturday, and the next day are the celebration of the holiday of Yud Tes Kislev, which is the liberation of the first Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, from Russian imprisonment. That is, and his imprisonment was, as we are taught, his imprisonment was an imprisonment of the mystical Torah of Hasidus. Hasidus is the remedy. This divine consciousness is the remedy for the human consciousness, the snake consciousness that's keeping us hidden. I'm not going to focus so much on Yud Tes Kislev, but I do want to say this. I do want to step into this energy in our group awareness. So the revelation, Torah, is the blueprint for creation. God created the world first very bright, but then there was a fall, and that was part of the plan, the fall in the Garden of Eden, because God created the snake, and the snake was meant to precipitate the fall, and it was all part of the plan. Why? So mankind could internalize darkness, density, the human condition, unconsciousness, limited consciousness, that in that limit, from that perspective of that limited consciousness, we get into conflicts with each other. Nobody sees, no two people, the Torah even says this, Ein Deus en Shabbos, no two people see life exactly the same way. Well, guess what? That's playing out on the global stage more than any time ever before. In fact, we never had a global stage, prior to our generation and recent times. And it's getting more and more and more focused. We're all more and more focused on one stage, but from different perspectives. So in that world of darkness and concealment and confusion, the snake world, let's call it, God shone a light for humanity, because there's a plan and there's a vision and there's a destiny, and we're like hurtling toward it right now in the final stages. So we are in a spiritual war. The war is mostly for consciousness. As somebody pointed out yesterday, I was listening to somebody who's in an intelligence insider in the US government. She was saying, if this had been the time of the Civil War in America, those of you Americans know Abraham Lincoln, the Civil War, if they had social media, there wouldn't have had to be bloodshed, because most of this it's a war for consciousness, and most of it is being conducted behind the scenes in terms of, what do you believe? What truth, what story, what narrative are you going to buy into? So as usual, we want to go deeper, understand what the battling forces are. How can we discern good from evil? How can we discern light from darkness, truth from falsehood? That's what it's all about. That's what this information is about. So what is the mainstream of empowerment, of divinity, of consciousness that allows us to do that? That is the divine consciousness that is embedded in the Torah, especially the mystical Torah, authentic Kabbalah and Hasidus. So Yud Tes Kislev, tonight, tomorrow, and also the next day as part of it, Chav Kislev, is specifically, Yud Tes means 19, by the way. Do we have another common use of the word 19 from the dark side? How about COVID-19? Do we have, what is coronavirus? What is coronavirus? I believe the co stands for corona, means crown. The crown is totally associated with the redeemed world. It's the the highest level, according to Hasidus, according to authentic Kabbalah mystical Torah. So we have the 19th of Kislev, we have 19, we have the crown, we have this whole process. It's not an accident. So the idea is that this 19, Yutes Kislev, not only was the first Rebbe of Chabad, the Alter Rebbe Lubavitch, released from Russian imprisonment. Why was he in prison? For spreading Torah, for teaching Torah. So you have the light of the Torah, that's the force, the divine force. Then you have the counter force, the snake, and the internalization of the snake in different groups and individuals. We all have some of it. On a personal level, it's a fractal, and then different groups, with different agendas, different people, different leaders carry more of it and play out that role on the cosmic stage. And then there are other forces that, that bring in primarily the great tzaddikim, the Moses of every generation, and everyone who leans into holiness, bringing in the other side. But the Torah is the light that's shining through the darkness. It is the only power, because it's divine power to utterly transform the darkness. Okay, so that he was in prison for teaching Torah. When he was let out of prison, it was clear, and he explained to us that there was a divine court case. Is the world, is humanity allowed to have this absolutely transformational divine consciousness light, this superpower, or not? And when he was imprisoned by the Russians, it was it was being debated. When he was freed, so was this deepest piece of divine mystical wisdom. Okay, now to what's happening. So as we look deeper, we have to be able to discern who are the actors that are carrying forth the darkness, the agenda of the snake, and who are those who are fighting against it. And that's the second piece of this. So how do you know who's fighting for the divine plan and who's fighting against it? Basically, who is shutting down synagogues, churches, prayer gatherings here in Israel? They've been doing lockdowns every holiday. So who is promoting an agenda that is supportive of God's plan, and who is fighting against it? Simple way to discern. It doesn't matter what they say and how nice their words are. What are they doing? So as always, you must look deeper. Who's standing up? And who is sincerely believing in a higher power as they stand up and speak on behalf of humanity? Who is risking themselves, whether it's physically or whether it's in most cases on the public stage, although it's gotten kind of dangerous for a lot of people out there? Who is risking themselves to speak up for their fellow human? Who are the small? We're entering the holiday of Hanukkah soon. What is Hanukkah? Hanukkah has two basic themes. One is the victory of the few who are fighting with God for holiness against the many. The public narrative. Who are the truth holders? Which people are willing to stand up again? We should count our blessings that the farther we can get on a spiritual, emotional, consciousness level, the less anybody will have to actually fight it out physically. But who's willing to stand up? Who are the few that are, despite peer pressure, despite, fines from governments or whatever, who are willing, despite censorship, who's willing to look deeper, who's willing to actually activate their minds and search for a deeper truth, going deeper. That's why this is called going deeper. Okay, so that's the theme of Hanukkah, as well as the oil that burned for 8 days. I'm not going to go into this now. We'll have another live for Hanukkah for sure. But basically that inner oil also is represented by mystical Torah, by Hasidus, authentic Kabbalah, and the core fifth level of the soul, the deepest level of the soul, which is never disconnected from God. When we illuminate that, we are not part of creation, so to speak. Of course, we're still here physically, but we're not subject to the laws of nature and the forces that be, the powers that be in the world, because we are partnering with God. The more you can release that inner part of the soul, the more you're partnering with God in bringing about this messianic era. I just want to mention also, I hope it's not too much. I haven't even gotten to the main part of what I want to say, but it's important to note, it's useful to note that the gematria, the Hebrew numerological equivalent of the snake of Nachash, as I've mentioned before, is Mashiach, is the Redeemer, the Messianic Redeemer. So darkness, it's not only that we fight against darkness and try to bring light, the light is hidden in the darkness. Every single thing, let's bring it down, and that will lead into the core theme of this live stream. Every single thing that you experience in your life, that you are experiencing in the world, whether as an individual or as the collectives that we are, Every human being is a cell, as Hasidus tells us, the Alter Rebbe says, who was who was liberated from Russian imprisonment on Yutas Kislev, says that every single human being, meaning those living now, meaning those who ever lived, meaning those who ever will live, is a cell of the collective body of Adam, the first man and woman. So here we are, all in it together. We are experiencing this together on behalf of cosmic evolution. So every single thing that you experience, every challenge you have, every cosmic challenge, geopolitical challenge, health challenge, all of these challenges, they're here for one and one purpose only. And that is to enable us, to push us to connect on a deeper level, a truer level, a much more superpower level, a divine level, to awaken that deepest core of the soul. I'm really feeling this in my body. In order to cross that river into another plane of reality while being in our bodies in this world. That's the way we become partners in creation. That's the way our thoughts truly influence reality, not just in our own little realms, but in the world at large. We need to connect to that light, that beacon, that of the blueprint for creation, which is here. It's not just information. Of course, it's information, it's inspiration, it's wisdom, all that, but it's also a living transmission. God is in it. Until you have learned this and experienced it, you don't really, I'm sure there are many levels that I don't experience, but God is in it. When you connect so deeply to the divine consciousness enclosed in the Torah that God gave for these times to rectify the world, to reveal the light from the darkness, it's all one giant birth process. When you connect to that on the deepest level, you're actually connecting to the living presence of God in partnership, miraculous partnership. Okay, so this year, as we've said before, as many of you know, is that the year in Hebrew is 5781, which is an acronym in Hebrew. In the Torah, the numbers are described by letters when it comes to the year. So it's Tav Shin Pei Aleph, which stands for, this will be the year of Plaot Arenu, which means of wonders that I will show you. Now, what is a wonder? A wonder is a type of miracle. Pele, the word singular for plaot is pele. What is a wonder? It is a type of miracle that is so cosmic and so profound and so transformational and so all-encompassing that it changes the nature of nature. Not that it suspends nature from above, like the splitting of the sea, but then the sea goes back, like when these stories of people, nobody should have experienced it, but like the car rolls over, 8 times and someone sees an angel, or they just feel God, that's a miracle. That's not what we're going for. That is not a Pele Plaot. The nature of this year is miracles, wonders that change the entire way that nature works. The entire way that nature works. That's what's going on now. Now, when that happens, what is the process? The process is of an undercover, an inside story that's expressing itself, a process that's expressing itself, that's deeply, so deep, so powerful, so profound, so utterly transformational, that it shows up not on top of what we experience in life, but within what we experience in life, meaning that it's going to show up in the thoughts that you have, in the people that come into your life, in the YouTubes that are going to present themselves in front of you, in the leaders of governments, in the way that the courts, fight things out, judge things, in every aspect, in the way, in the agendas that are coming forth, in the coronavirus, in the cures for the coronavirus, in the lies about the coronavirus, and all of that. It's going to come out in all of that. And remember, I said in the beginning, we are here. The reason that there was a snake, the reason that there was an eating from the tree of knowledge is so that we could internalize the concealment and the darkness, because only when it's ours can we literally transform it into light and wisdom. Now, when you have a challenge, it offers you the opportunity to either back off and constrict yourself, become smaller, or to dig into deeper powers and deeper connection with divine consciousness, in which case you become expanded. And in a certain way, for sure extraordinary, in a certain way, it's more than a certain way, it's possible to become superhuman in the sense that we normally consider human. Just like I've been saying, when you move into a new way of being, into the way of being of wonders, your nature becomes much, much more miraculous and divine. So it's not about overriding your nature. It's about transforming your nature so that the deepest essence of your being, the divine source, starts to flow again through your veins, through your thoughts, through your eyes, through everything about you, through the circumstances of your life. It doesn't come for free. And that must be emphasized. It is a process in order to transform, to reveal that deepest light. And that's where we are right now, the deepest light. We are being presented with challenges that force us to go out of our comfort zone. I'm going to tell you something really personal. This morning, as I said in the beginning, my family, some of you know, has had a series of challenges, some shocks, whatever. Hopefully everything's resolving well, but it's not easy. And I asked this morning, sometimes I talk to God, and sometimes I hear an answer in my head. I don't claim to say that's directly from God, but certainly it's from something that's beyond my logical mind, whether it's my soul, my core, my, whatever you want to, however, it doesn't matter. When we don't know, we don't know. We don't pretend that we do. But I asked the question, Hashem, God, don't you want me to feel secure? And the answer I got immediately was no, which you can imagine was disconcerting. And then I asked again, do you want me to feel safe and protected? And I got yes. So what does that tell me? That tells me that it's time to break out. What is secure? We're all bound up. We stay in our comfort zone. We stay in our thinking zone. We connect to the information that makes us feel comfortable, that doesn't challenge us in any way. We stay on the level that we're used to. We're floating around in this one little space. That's not our destiny. That is security, and our security, you guys, our security is being taken away. It just is. That's obvious. That does not mean that our safety is being removed. That means that we're being asked to expand and to deepen, to connect up, connect in, connect around, look deeper, and especially to learn from the blueprint for creation, to connect to the inner story that is in the Torah of what's happening now. It's a roadmap. So how is this playing out? So for those of you, I'm going to give a little recap because this seems very, very clear. Let me just say one other personal thing that happened. In searching for information and processing what's happening in my own life and watching, reading a lot, trying to dig deeper, listening, as I said, to, different people who are somehow connected to intelligence that's going on in the United States, it really looks like, and this fits so much with everything, with the whole divine picture, with the whole Torah picture, the messianic picture, that process. We're not going to be allowed to stay the same. Darkness has been deeply hidden, wired into the structures of creation. I don't want to use words that are going to cause me to be censored, which just tells you something about, who's controlling things and why, but, the battle that's going on in the US, the battle of narratives, the battle of control, etc. The fact that things we can see if we're looking, that things have been orchestrated not for our benefit, and that it's woven in deeply, the snake energy, the snake pattern is woven deeply into the political structures through which we can choose our leadership. If we aren't actually choosing our leadership, if people who manipulate are able to get into power, guess what happens? It's not just that they cheat us from what happens is that they make laws that we have to be subject to. Is that happening now? It is happening now. In the last video I did about the Great Reset, that's what's happening. So that's just another piece of the darkness that when it's under the surface and things aren't shaking too much, we can kind of let it go. It's easier to stay above it's easier not to think about it. Most of us don't even know about it. Like, who cares? I'm busy. But when it gets into our face to the point where it's crashing economies and terrifying people, and there's massive attempts to control, and there's confusion and polarity and so much more. So then it's time. Then there's only one answer, and that is to look deeper at the divine plan. The evil is coming up from where it's been concealed so that we can see it, so that we can transform it, so that we can unwind the confusion, which is also from the snake. Many things that happened when Adam and Eve are our collective souls, of which we're all cells in that body, in that soul body. So when we so to speak. And that's in that DNA level, ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil at the urging of the snake. Good and evil got confused. And the Torah says that from that point, there was never any good without a little bit of evil, meaning lying, meaning covering up God. And on the opposite as well. There's no evil without at least a little bit of goodness and truth. And this is how we're able to be deceived. We've got to stop being deceived. And that's part of this process. So in the story of Purim, it was the ancient Persia, and the Jewish people were required at that time to wake up. So Persia was being run. Persia was the Persian Empire. The king of the Persian Empire, his name was Ahasuerus. He was in charge of, it says, 127 kingdoms. He was in charge of he was a ruler over most of the civilized world. He wasn't a nice guy. And he had an evil advisor. So in every generation, his name was Haman. In every generation, or Haman, if you know it that way, there is an entity, maybe a leader, a group of leaders, a culture, whatever, that carries the energy of the snake, that is battling the energy of divine revelation. So Haman was from that energy is called a Amalek. We're commanded, everybody can be redeemed, the Torah tells us, except for Amalek. People who are from the energy of Amalek, like if they're pure Amalek, they're very few in the world, but there are some. They cannot be redeemed. It's just pure anti-God. It's pure anti-human. It's pure evil. So in that time, Haman was the Amalek. It was Hitler in his time. We won't go into that right now. So the king, we're told he was a foolish king. He wasn't a very nice king. Ego-based, self-centered, and basically was in charge of all the civilized world. Haman convinced him to make a long story short. Haman was angered by Mordechai, by the tzaddik, the Jewish sage of the time, who was the leader of that generation, and Mordechai refused to bow down to Haman. He stood up, and Haman was furious. Mordechai was the only thing between him and full power and control. This is a theme that exists now. So if you think I'm telling you an ancient story, think again. Okay, so Mordechai refused to bow. Haman came up with a plot, which anyway, that's the nature of Amalek. Let's just destroy the Jews. That comes up frequently in generations. That's part of the story also. And Haman paid Ahasuerus a lot of money. Ahasuerus was pretty willing to destroy the Jews anyway. And they made a deal. And the Jews, basically, I'm not going to go deeply into this. What I want to bring out is the theme. The Jews were under the threat of extinction from an absolute ruler for just about a year. And this was a divine situation, a divine test that was designed to allow the people, the souls of Israel, to experience the truth about their connection with God. And what we're taught is that not one person converted. In fact, Esther, who was the niece of Mordechai, Queen Esther, was married to Ahasuerus. Again, not going into the details of the story, it was against her will, but she did it. She was forced to do it, and she was a player in this whole scenario, representing, the soul, representing the Jewish people, representing the God light. In the end, she won over Ahasuerus, and the plot was foiled, and it turned around. The Jews were able to destroy their enemies and all kinds of miracles. It's one of the couple festivals that will be left in the messianic era that we'll still celebrate, and because it's so profound. Why is it so profound? Because the soul prevailed, and because all of the events of Purim took place over many years. We're taught that in the scroll, wherever it says the king, every Purim, the story is read in a hand-printed Torah scroll and so forth, but everywhere it says the king, it refers to God, even though if it says King Ahasuerus, okay, but when it refers to the king, was also Ahasuerus, the king in this time, it's also referring to God, teaching us, showing us that it's the divine hand operating through the king to play out these events, to catalyze these events, to bring out from each of us the core of our own souls and our intrinsic, inexorable, unbreakable connection with God, with the Creator, and with our source and purpose. That was the story of Purim. But the fact that it happened over many years, beneath the surface, it looked, and this is all part of what the Torah explains. These are themes that exist now. That's why I'm bringing this out. You must know this now, that the events that were happening under the surface through the leaders of that time, that was operated through the king of the universe. And they happened over a period of time through natural events, because this is the level of Pele. This is the level of wonders that is designed to hide within nature so that ultimately it transforms nature. And at the end of that transformation, there is nothing, no one, no place, no circumstance, and no event that does not reveal God, God's blessing, God's love, God's oneness, including everything about you. So I believe now, based on everything, that this year I will show you wonders. Plaos Arenu is telling us, not that it's clearly, you know, some of us thought that at the beginning of the year when Rosh Hashanah came, it's all going to be great now because it's your wonders, and wonders are wonderful, right? But it hasn't played out that way so far. Anxiety is rising, confusion is rising, polarity is rising. In certain senses, challenges are rising. Are we meant to be secure? Clearly not. Are we meant to be safe, blessed, supernatural, miraculous? Probably. There's a river that we need to cross in order to get from one state of being to another. For me, it's a work in progress, but today it occurred to me that when the Jews were taken out of the souls of Israel, Bnei Israel were taken out of Egypt by a divine process that broke the intensity of slavery and allowed for the Torah to be revealed. So as Kabbalah describes, what happened then was there was a split in the sea, right? In the sea, in the Red Sea down the end of the Sinai, but there was a corresponding split in the Yam Soph, the sea of the Red Sea, the Sea of Reeds, that split literally from the Torah, from the Bible, it's called the Yam Suf. That same word with the same letters can be read Soph, Yam Soph. Soph means boundaries, ends, limitations. And in fact, when there was a splitting of the physical sea, we're told that everyone who walked through saw revelations greater than the greatest prophet. Because all of the boundaries of concealment of the universe were split open at that time to imprint upon the soul the supernatural. But when Mashiach comes in this process, we're told that instead of splitting the sea, which Kabbalistically corresponds to Malchus of Atzilus, it's the source of where Creator starts to show up in a concealed way as creation. Leave it at that. There's a much higher level of splitting of revelation and opening that's meant to come at the time of the final redemption, when this process is finished. And that is the splitting of what's called the river of Bina. So without claiming that I understand this completely, I'm thinking this is happening now. Not that it's a future event. Obviously, there are parts of it that are happening in the future that are beyond our active control. You know, when you work to a certain degree, like the 50th level of Bina, we're taught we can climb up 49 levels of Bina. I'll explain what that is in a second. And then the 50th one, God has to split. But what is Bina? Bina is the left brain. The left brain is our limited, it is the information, what is absorbed literally in the brain on the left brain will give you your experience of reality. That's the lens, the filter from which you will perceive and process everything. So if we're being moved from security into a higher form of safety and connection, hopefully there's going to be an insecurity, there's going to be an uprooting, and it's part of the process. It's like birth, right? I'm not choosing it. If I were choosing, I wouldn't choose it because it's not fun. But it has to be done. So the river of Bina is considered a river, a knowledge that I won't go. This is material that actually, in the Soul Bites, the text that I'm teaching in Soul Bites on Mondays through these lives is actually teaches about that in great, great, great depth. Also, part of what I have learned and taught in as deeply as I can, work in progress, for many, many years, because it transforms the brain, it transforms the Bina. But if our Bina is split, our Bina, your perception is different from mine. What your left brain has absorbed as reality has to do with your DNA, your past lives, your personal upbringing, everything that happened to you in your life, your trauma, all of it. What you've learned, what you've been told is true, what you've been told is not true. So each of us, again, each of us has a unique perspective that no one else has. That's in the Bina. So in the splitting of the river of Bina, you guys, in this hidden process, which is being orchestrated by the King, who's operating through global leaders and organizations and secret agendas, and each of our lives, there must be a splitting of Bina. This is prophesied, meaning an opening in the secure mental structures that we have about what's real, what's not, how life is supposed to work, how it's not, what we need to be secure and safe, what we don't, all of that stuff, who's right, who's wrong, who we can believe, who we can't, all of that, it's being split. And the more that I've said this before, I'll say it again, the more you can align yourself with the new that is coming in and what is happening to you. Doesn't mean you shouldn't try to change it, but the more you can align yourself with whatever is right now as a starting point, the more you can continue to cast your vision and your desires on a higher and higher level into this divine process. The more, as I said, the more aligned you are, the more connected you are, the more expanded your consciousness is in terms of the deepest Torah, the God, right? The soul, the purpose, the more influence your thoughts, intentions, and actions will have on the whole. Because it's like the fulcrum effect, right? The deeper you get close to the bottom of the thing and you're properly levered. So it's you have a lot of power that normally you wouldn't have. That's in your own life and in the world at large. So it's getting harder, the whole idea of consciousness attracting and creating that we've been playing with for the last many years. Many of us find it's getting harder. How come? Why would you think? By the way, I didn't say this, but if you like this, I would like this to get out farther. If you think it's valuable, please like, please share, please comment. Really makes a difference in the Facebook algorithms. And I'd love to hear what you have to say. Like, why do you think it's getting harder to change, reality with, in the usual manners? In a way, it's getting harder. In a way, maybe it's not. But the reason that some things are getting harder, I find that healers I know, need to go deeper in order to accomplish the same results that used to be easier, that used to be, with more superficial. Same thing here. We are being called to connect with our deepest selves and with the deepest core nature of reality, which is Ein Od Milvado. There's nothing here but God, the King that is operating through everything. We're meant to see it. The Rebbe said, open your eyes to see Mashiach and Geula, to see the messianic, redemption in everything. That refers to the eyes of the mind and the eyes of the heart. So perceive it deeper, align yourself with it, with that divine process. This is a spiritual war, and it's time for each of us to ask ourselves, which side am I fighting for? Because there's no neutral, there's no Switzerland here. I found out Switzerland is not actually neutral. That's another lie. But, it's like the spider web that's manipulating things. There are many of those. But we each have to ask ourselves, especially as Hanukkah is coming up, as Yud Kislev is coming up, there's the Soviet forces that, the Russian, but it's morphed into the Soviet, that were fighting against God, that imprisoned the Alter Rebbe and the revelation of Hasidus. And then there was the light of prayer, good deeds, connection, learning, Torah, oneness that counteracted it. And when the Alter Rebbe was freed, this light and power was freed. But it's up to each of us to fight that battle out, to identify which side we're fighting for in our own lives and our own world, and to learn it, to connect, to use it. And here's the other thing on Purim. One of the counteractions to the decree of Haman through the evil Amalek, through the king Achashverosh and the king of the world, to bring out the Torah, the core of the soul, and the core connection of the souls of Israel to God. It was a time of apparent disconnect, and the Purim event proved that the connection was real, that the receiving of the Torah had permeated every cell of those souls, proved again by the fact that not one person converted, gave up Torah in order to save their physical lives. This was profound, and it left an indelible impression. Movements come and go, like the zeitgeist, what we experience different times as groups and as individuals and throughout lifetimes. Sometimes, things look one way on the surface, sometimes they look another way, but you must know also that the things that happen cosmically at our depth, the things that are imprinted in our innermost wiring, continue to accumulate light, goodness, and divine power. So that when our consciousness shifts, which it needs to do, the inner structure is fully built. It wasn't back in those days. It is now. So that's the shift in consciousness now. That's what this time is about. Consciousness and then aligning with that. So that innermost, that's why Purim is still celebrated now. It will be celebrated when the Messianic era is complete, when there's a world of heaven on earth. Why? Because this is the revelation of the core connection, that connection that comes from the soul. So what did Esther do? That Jewish queen that was married to the foolish ruler of the world, Ahasuerus. So she fasted. Mordecai said, it's up to you whether you want to speak up. She was in danger of her life to speak up to the king. And Mordecai said, it's up to you, but if you don't do this, there will be another person who will stand up, because God is going to save the people. But if you don't stand up, you and your house will perish. That's what he said to her, basically. And she went to the king. But before she went to the king, she fasted. I'm not suggesting that we have to fast. I don't think that that's the issue. But here's what I want to say. She said very famous words, and those words were Lech Knesset Kol HaYehudim. She said, go out and gather all of the Jews, all of the people. And in gathering and praying together, that's where the force lay. That's where the power was. Sorry. That's where the power was. It's very, very interesting. And I'm going to end with this. I told you it was going to be long, but I really wanted to get this out. The times are so crucial. We have to take it seriously. And that's what I'm realizing. It's like a birth, you can be lying in the sun when you're pregnant, maybe when the contractions aren't that intense. But if we're meant to change, if we're meant to cross the river of Bina in our bodies, then it requires some change, and the pressure causes the change. And what's it going to be like? The Rebbe keeps urging us toward creating miracles by our nature, toward shifting to a level of connection with God that is beyond the laws of nature. But what's it going to take for each of us to do that? That's a work in progress, right? But the idea of Lech Knesset as Kol HaYehudim, that go and gather all of the people together, this whole thing with the COVID-19, stay 6 feet apart, don't gather, shutting down during the holidays, shutting down houses of worship and schools. It's the it's snake. So we need to find ways to gather, whether we gather online, whether we gather in prayer, whether we gather together, whatever it is, however it is that people choose to do this, we need to stand up and gather, because that's where our power is, to understand that we're all in it together, not to see each other as the enemy, but rather to see the snake, the Amalek, the forces that have wound themselves like a poison ivy vine around the life force and potential of the body human. That's where we need to see the enemy. The rest of it, we need to gather together and to help each other to see more clearly with love and respect, and with sharing and with prayer. Pray for each other. Give charity, help each other out. Even if you don't feel great about somebody, see if you can help them. If there's somebody you don't like so much, we're not talking about a Amalek. The very evil cannot be redeemed. But somebody who's just confused and they irritate you, pray for them. Pray not just that they'll figure out that you're right. No, that's not what I mean. Pray that they should be happy, that their problems should be resolved, that they should be blessed. And we're also taught that when you pray for someone else, your prayers are answered first. So that's just a positive piece there. Give charity where it's needed. Reach out to someone who might not have so many friends, who might be alone. The more we do this, the more we are uniting together and activating that divine power. We are a bigger vessel. More light can shine through us. Together, as part of the divine plan, we are unbeatable. So we are living a time when it's not like the time of the Maccabees. It's not like the time of Purim. We're already all connected in this miraculous way online. And energetically, many times, if you do energy work, if you do healing or whatever, prayer, sometimes many of us feel that we can feel. I as a teacher, even if I don't have a camera and I'm just on the phone, or if I'm coaching someone on the phone, I can totally feel their feelings in my body. There are millions of us who experience this, and it only grows. Our inner connection is being more and more revealed. It's time for us our consciousness, the shift has to come in the consciousness, and aligning with that, to lean into that and to not be deceived. The voice of the snake, is accelerating. It's getting louder and louder because it's wound into the social media. It's wound into the mainstream media. It's wound into most of the politicians in our world today. I hate to say it. It's wound into a lot of religious leadership. It's wound into all kinds of places. But get yourself clear, connect with others, stand up in the ways that you can, know that God is on your side. This is a spiritual war. Hashtag spiritual war, hashtag spiritual politics. But it is the year of wonders. We are changing the inner wiring in our own beings. We are changing the inner wiring of the universe. We are, each of us, lighting up as a cell and vibrating and affecting the whole in ways that we can see, in ways that we cannot possibly see, but that are so, so powerful. And every time you connect with someone else, it amplifies your power, not 1 + 1, but 1 times, 2 times 2, 4 times 4, it's exponential. And you have to know this. So again, if you resonate with this, like, share, comment to enable more people to have access to this information. I'm certainly not the only one giving out information like this, but it is imperative. Now is the time, you guys. This is it. We're in the final stretch. There's no question about it. And we cannot stay in our safety zone because that's not the destiny. We're meant to shift to a new dimension. Healthy, in the body, with prosperity, but it has to happen. And the more we align, the easier it will be to maintain safety and goodness and abundance and healing, or to provoke it, to invoke it, to receive it, by splitting that river of Bina, by being willing to let go of the way that we see things, go deeper, connect deeper. And Shabbat Shalom to everybody. Lots of love, and I'll see you on the other side. Take care.